Last week we learned how Abraham got from the land over here, way over here to Israel. He was the first patriarch and he was given a promise by God. And the promise was that he would receive land, many descendants, blessing, and redemption. Last week we saw how he ended up with the land. This week we're going to talk about the many descendants. So we start out with Joseph in Egypt bringing his brothers there in the time of famine. They were treated very, very well and were able to get their own land and crops and started to settle into the land with wives and children and so on. Now, originally that was all right. People respected them because they were the brothers of Joseph and he was quite a high official. But you can imagine after 400 years, nobody remembers Joseph, but they do remember the Hebrews. That's the name that they gave to the descendants of Jacob. These represent Egyptians. They lived along the Nile. They were an agricultural people. They needed the water to grow good crops. So this represents their population. Originally, the population was very small of Hebrews as they came into the land. But as the generations start to grow, the population of the Egyptians stays pretty much the same. But this population begins to double, and in the next generation, it doubles again. And in the next generation, it doubles again. And this is called exponential growth. So that by the time you've got the 400 years over, you end up with a population explosion of Hebrews. In those days, they didn't go to the hospital to have babies. They had what was called a midwife who helped the mother have the babies. So the Egyptian midwives were told by the officials, when these Hebrew babies are born, and if it happens to be a boy, make sure that it doesn't live. Now that's not a very nice thing to say, but that was their solution. They hoped that by doing that, before long, they would be able to limit and at least control the population and get it back to where they liked it. God had a plan for returning his people back to the promised land, but he needed a champion with all the right credentials. The threat of genocide couldn't stop God. Although the Egyptian midwives were told to kill the Hebrew baby boys, they had become friends with their neighbors, and they couldn't do it. Even so, Hebrew mothers were careful to hide their infant sons away from officials. Our story today shows once again how God thwarts the schemes of the enemy and keeps his promises.
Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine baby, she hid him 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and plastered it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds on the bank of the river. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her attendants walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid to bring it. When she opened it, she saw the child. He was crying and she took pity on him. "This must be one of the Hebrews' children," she said. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she took him as her son. She named him Moses, because, she said, "I drew him out of the water."